Thanks everybody for taking the time to be here today. I'm just so happy to be able to share some of what I've learned over the last 11, almost 12 years now, working with survivors of covert abuse and coercive control. We are not your typical domestic violence agency. We are a nonprofit based in Silicon Valley, but we serve survivors from all over the world because of our unique focus. Coercive control in the professional class. Our survivors, they are brave, brilliant, educated women from all races, all religions, all different parts of the world, but all made sisters by this common experience they have of finding themselves trapped in a relationship with a powerful, sophisticated, covert abuser. They are doctors, lawyers, engineers, therapists, CEOs, public figures, and so are their partners. So our survivors face some pretty unique challenges that come from being in a relationship with a wealthy, powerful person who uses more subtle forms of abuse to coerce and control their intimate partner. So Emma was asking me to share a little bit about what women can expect when they call WomenSV for help. And we answer, we have a helpline as well as a support group, but here's generally what they can expect when they call. They'll be greeted by a trauma-informed advocate who will meet them exactly where they are. Are they thinking of leaving? Do they need to stay until the children are older? Did they just leave? Are they going through a divorce? Have they just met someone, or are they starting to see some red flags? Whatever stage they're at in their relationship, they're welcome here. And we tell them about the services that we offer at WomenSV, education and support around coercive control, helping survivors recognize what it looks like, the tactics that covert abusers use to control their partners and wear them down, the impact this kind of abuse has on survivors and their children. And then we take some time to do some safety planning and build strategies to defend against those tactics. Sometimes we'll go to court with them to, virtually, or the police station to meet with police officers, but not to ever act as witnesses, but just to support them so they don't have to deal with this alone. In our first phone call with survivors, they may start to describe some of the scary or hurtful things that their partner has said or done. They may have called the police and nothing happened. They weren't believed, or there was nothing the police could do. So with coercive control, it's a lot more than, it's more often a pattern of behavior versus a single isolated act that's causing the damage. We tell them that we offer education and safety planning around all the areas they might be coming under attack. It could be emotional, financial, legal, technological, and you'll hear a lot about the technological part with Joe. But if it's coercive control, we tell them they don't deserve to be treated this way. It's not their fault. And there are strategies that we can share with them to help them deal with this kind of abuse more safely and effectively. We reassure them that they don't have to do this alone anymore. We'll be with them, supporting them for as long as they want. And often that's when they start to cry. But they're good tears. It's like a flood of relief, feeling like for the first time they've been heard, they've been seen, they've been believed, lifted up, encouraged, and it gives them new hope. So we'll ask what their goals are, and if appropriate, we'll offer a 2-hour intake. We'll gather more information about their background and what the abuse looked like, and then we'll use that information to do threat assessment and safety planning. If it feels like a good fit, we'll invite them to our virtual support group, and then they'll learn all about coercive control, get connected with other survivors, and then start building their virtual village through all the resources we offer, and then learn strategies to protect themselves and their children going forward. Before we dive into the topic of coercive control in depth, can we just take a moment to celebrate all the wonderful men and women here today who treat their partners with respect and care and tenderness? We're not going to be talking about you today, except to salute you. Today, we're going to be talking about a small subset of men and sometimes women, the outliers who use their power in order to control an intimate partner. Some of this information may be uncomfortable to hear, but here's my hope for you today, that what you learn here will keep you safer in the long run. And then if you share it with your friends and your colleagues and your children, if you have them, it'll do the same for them. Next slide, Emma. Well, so what's the problem? This kind of abuse is different from what we normally think of when we think of domestic violence. Violence, the word itself, it suggests that it's about, it's easier to identify this type of assault, violence implies something physical, puts the victim in fear for their immediate safety, and it usually leaves some kind of physical evidence behind. Abuse is a broader term. It's not always as obvious as a black eye or a broken arm. It's more subtle. It's often invisible, and it can go on for a long, long time before a survivor even realizes what she's experiencing is actually abuse. Sometimes it can take decades. They often blame themselves for not recognizing it earlier because they're smart. And they think I should have known better. How can you know if you've never been taught to recognize early warning signs? How can you know a language that you've never been taught? So today we'll learn a little bit more about what that language looks like. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you some examples and descriptions of what some of the forms of abuse look like in this kind of relationship. But whatever it looks like, and whatever part of town it's happening in, whatever economic bracket it's happening in, the goal is always the same: to coerce and control an intimate partner, to turn power into a dirty word. It's the abuse of power in order to control an intimate partner. Just a word about my pronouns that I'll be using in this presentation. Let's be clear that abuse happens across every community. It happens in heterosexual and same-sex relationships. It happens in the LGBT communities. There can be added pressure there even to stay quiet about abuse or anything that could cast a shadow while they're still in the fight for equal treatment in our society. But let's acknowledge that anyone can be a survivor: male, female, trans, non-binary, and anyone can be a perpetrator. That being said, for the purposes of this presentation for today, and because most survivors of domestic violence, from the statistics we have, are female, and because that's my area of expertise, WomenSV, I will use the pronoun she typically for the survivor and he for perpetrator. But will you please substitute whatever pronoun best fits your situation, your relationship. Next slide. Domestic violence, as you can see from these disturbing statistics, has an impact not just on the individual survivor, but on the company as a whole. You take domestic violence from home into the workplace when you go to work. It affects employee morale. It lowers their productivity and the quality, not just how much, but how well they're doing their job. It means missed days at work. And in the end, it can impact your company's bottom line because so many people, male and female, are suffering from this issue. It can also put others at risk if you have a vengeful, violent abuser who decides to transfer the abuse from home into the workplace. The solution isn't to send the survivor back home to their abuser. Some other companies, believe it or not, companies you know the name of, actually have had that as their domestic violence protocol. But this kind of banishment, sending them home, is just going to discourage survivors from coming forward in the future. And that's going to draw out the individual survivors suffering in silence until maybe something bad or even tragic happens. Because a lot of incidents of workplace violence also have this component, this history of domestic violence. Next slide, please. Did you know that 1 in 3 women across the planet will be beaten or raped during her lifetime? That's according to the World Health Organization. 1 in 3 women. And we're not even talking about the more subtle forms of abuse, the ones that we're going to be addressing today. We're not capturing the data for coercive control. It's hard to measure. It's underreported. And there's such shame, such social stigma attached to this issue, and such real danger in coming forward about it. All of these things conspire to keep a victim silent. Can we take a moment, though, to just recognize and honor the passing of this beautiful, beautiful soul, Mahsa Amini, 22-year-old young woman just starting her life, and then taken into police custody by the morality police for not wearing her headscarf properly, where she died in police custody. But do you see what's happening around the world? That people, men, women, everybody across the world, trans, non-binary, everybody, doesn't matter what your orientation is, we're all people in the end. We're all people with hearts and wanting to love and be loved. And that's what unites us, all the good people here in this room and across the planet. We're all coming together to say, enough, enough. But what happens when you come from a culture where it's hard to speak out? Different cultures have different responses to domestic abuse, and often women can feel pressured to tolerate a certain level of abuse. If it means keeping the family together and protecting the family's public image. One of my Japanese survivors, a beautiful, beautiful lady from a well-to-do family, had wonderful parents, both doctors. You can come from a dysfunctional family or a functional family and still end up in this type of relationship because, as we'll see later, these guys are so charming. She came from a wonderful family, but because of her Asian heritage, she had been taught to always put others' needs ahead of her own. She lived this life of service in the world, and with her partner eventually. They lived in an apartment building. One night he put his hands on her throat and he beat her severely, but she didn't cry out for help. You know why? She was afraid that she would wake the neighbors. She was also afraid of the shame it would bring her parents. But working with survivors from different cultures requires special attention to cultural differences that can mean a world of difference in their own fight for freedom. They can be so much more hesitant to disclose abuse, especially to even other members within their own culture, because of that shame, because of the social stigma. And that's why they often end up calling us. And that's why we have women from all different races, all different cultures, from all around the world, all united in this common struggle to be free. So look at all the cultures that we come from. Everybody here, there's your culture of origin, the country that you came from, the family that you came from, if you have a religious practice, there's certain expectations around that, the culture of your profession, your workplace culture, pop culture, so many cultures, so many expectations, values, beliefs, taboos, adding layer upon layer of challenge and risk, and coming forward to disclose that you too have been a victim of intimate partner abuse in spite of all your education and intelligence and your religion and your family's pressure to make it work. And then add on top of that the culture of affluence, and it just makes it more difficult to address. Because in the culture of affluence, if you're working at Google, you're in the culture of affluence, middle to upper income area, where you have probably a nice home and a good salary, and you don't worry about putting food on the table. But if you grew up in that culture of affluence, middle to upper income area, weren't you expected that to go to a good school, to get good grades, to pick up a sport or a musical instrument and do well at that? Didn't you apply to all the best schools and wanting to get into them? And then when you graduate and when you get your degree and you're earning your living and you have a wonderful profession, aren't you expected to have a partner that's similarly inclined and maybe get a nice house with a white picket fence and a big fluffy dog and post your pictures on social media for all to admire your lovely life? So how does domestic violence fit into any part of that picture? This is how it hides. You'd never expect a doctor, a judge, a therapist, or a mayor to be an abuser. Next slide, please. So what does a covert abuser look like? Can you pick out the abuser? Let's spot the abuser here. Oh, the hint, actually it's a red flag, a red herring. The guy with the orange frame around him with the beer bottle and the clenched fist. And what's he wearing? What do we call that? The wife beater tank top. Isn't that the stereotypical image of an abuser? What about all these other people up here? All these other men? Every single one of them has been found to have committed domestic violence. Everyone on the top row, the ultimate act of domestic violence. We heard about Brian Laundrie not too long ago. So the issue is here, you can't tell by looking at them. You have to look at what they do. And that's a challenge when they're doing it behind closed doors. So what motivates a covert abuser? Oh, things like power, social status, money, sex, winning, revenge, maintaining that public image. You test or challenge or threaten a covert abuser's public image, you are taking your life in your hands. They are very shame sensitive, good at shaming others, but their public image is very important to preserve. They're also about defeating, dominating, destroying anyone and anything that gets in their way, including their ex-partner. That's what motivates them. This isn't your healthy, normal person that's motivated by empathy, compassion, loving relationships. We're not talking about that kind of person. We're talking about the outliers. Our work is at WomenSV supported by prosecuting attorneys, private investigators, therapists, forensic psychologists, and we all agree on a certain personality profile for many of these perpetrators. There's a name for it. This cluster of personality traits that they all seem to have in common. It's called the dark tetrad. If you've been to Reed Malloy's lectures through the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, he's talked about the dark tetrad that includes 4 different categories, and they're all in the same person: Machiavellian, narcissistic, psychopathic, and sadistic. All 4, you got it, all 4 for the price of 1 in the same person. And when I do my trainings for therapists, these are the very labels that they feed back to me after I describe the behaviors of these are the labels they feed back to me when I describe the behaviors of a covert abuser. Machiavellian, meaning they have an honest face in public, another very different one behind closed doors, often very intelligent, educated, have an advanced professional degree and career. They often are involved in philanthropic activities or volunteer work, or they might donate to worthy causes, coach their kids' soccer team. It all makes them look very good out in the world. But they're also very calculating, opportunistic, and strategic. They look for weaknesses to attack and exploit. Then there's the narcissistic piece, meaning they think the world revolves or should revolve around them. They have quite a grandiose sense of self-importance and entitlement. It's all about me. It's their show 24/7. They always feel like they're the smartest one in the room. And unfortunately, they often are. And then there's the psychopathic piece, meaning they lack empathy, they lack remorse, they lack self-reflection. How is couples counseling going to help in a situation like this, where they always feel that they must be right, they have to win, and it's about power and winning and domination? They can hurt people and they don't seem to feel any guilt about it. They see people as possessions for them to use as they please, to use and use up like resources. When those possessions are no longer useful or when they cause trouble, they will get discarded. They define human worth in terms of net worth. How much are you worth? What have you done for me lately? And for the kids, their kids, it's often that same kind of lens. How you doing in school? How you doing in sports? What are your accomplishments? What's your GPA? What's making them look good? And they lie easily. They lie often, even when they don't need to. It's like they just want to keep in practice. And they seem to enjoy getting away with their bad behavior. One abuser started a secret affair with his secretary at work, and then he would bring her home for business dinners for his wife to cook for them. Lastly, we have sadistic, and that means deriving some kind of pleasure or satisfaction from the pain that they're causing the very ones that they should be loving and protecting the most. And sadly, there may be a reason why covert abusers could be overrepresented in the business world, because you don't need empathy to succeed in the business world. It may actually be a liability under some circumstances. You want to crush your competition, not feel sorry for them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what does an abuse survivor or victim look like? We looked at the perpetrator. What about the survivor? What do they look like? Same answer. You can't tell. You can't tell by looking. Just a note on terminology here. Why do I say survivor or victim? In the domestic violence world, we often like to use the term survivor, and we don't want to think about victim mentality, but we're not talking about victim mentality. We're talking about crime victim, a crime victim. Coercive control is a liberty crime because it robs you of your freedom. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. But another reason why we use the term victim sometimes is because not all of them survive. All of these women on the top row experienced the ultimate act of domestic violence. From left to right, the first 4, they were killed by their intimate partner. And in the upper right-hand corner, Carmen Dow lost her son to intimate partner violence. Everybody here has experienced coercive control. Even Hollywood celebrity Evan Rachel Wood, who was one of the driving forces behind Family Code 6320, which is all about coercive control. Now we have a law in the books in California protecting people, victims of that kind of abuse, because they've incorporated it into disturbing your peace. So Evan Rachel Wood, coercive control survivor. And guess who else? Senator Susan Rubio, the major driving force in getting Family Code 6320 on coercive control passed. Senator Susan Rubio, domestic violence survivor, Senator Susan Rubio. Next slide, please. So how can you identify coercive control in a relationship? Here's how it starts. It's a slippery slope. Perpetrators are usually very charming in the beginning. Charming, that's the word we hear over and over again. He was so charming, just swept me off my feet. But watch closely. If you look a little closer, you might see a little road rage here, a little teasing there, making jokes at your expense, a small suggestion about what you should eat, what you should wear, how you should wear your hair. It could be perfectly innocent. It could be part of a gradual effort to undermine your confidence and your independence. If it's teasing, it can all start off in good fun, and then gradually it can take this new turn, this new twist into shaming you in front of others. Or let's say you're a writer and you give your partner a piece of writing to look at. In the beginning, they may be full of praise, but over time, they may suggest a little edit here, maybe cut out this sentence, or maybe this paragraph, maybe that doesn't fit there. Maybe that's not the right topic to be addressing right now. How about this topic? So before you know it, you could end up doubting yourself so much that you have trouble putting pen to paper at all. But you see how creeping it is, how incremental, the old frog in the pot of water, degree by degree. Or you may feel like you can't spend as much time with your friends or extended family members anymore. You do try to see them. He might make you feel guilty afterwards about it, or give you the silent treatment. He may insist that you give up your career, saying they'll take care of everything since they make more money anyway. Then later on, when you become a stay-at-home mom and you're financially dependent on them, they may end up calling you a parasite and making you feel guilty for not working. It's all about gaining power. It's all about gradually breaking down your boundaries, testing your boundaries, probing them, breaching them, seeing what they can get away with. That's how the subtle erosion of your freedom happens, a little bit at a time. And this is the key point. This is the objective of coercive control. Break down every part of you a little at a time so you end up completely dependent on them. Then they can do whatever they want with you, and you won't have the strength to leave them when you do realize what they're doing. If you ever do realize, because you don't have broken bones or bruises to show for it necessarily. But this is why this type of abuse is so insidious, because it's slow, because it's creeping like a giant spider that's weaving a web slowly around you, one invisible strand at a time, until you end up living in fear, walking on eggshells, feeling completely paralyzed, unable to escape without help, at least. And it's not something anybody should try to do alone. And that's where we come in. So when it comes to threats, they're not going to say things like, I'm going to run over you with my truck, I'm going to kill you. That's way too in your face. So if she's done something that he doesn't like, he might just take out his gun and start cleaning it in front of her. It can escalate to strangulation. One of the most significant predictors of fatality in abusive relationships is near fatal, non-fatal strangulation. And it can, again, slippery slope, it can gradually make its way into a relationship by way of the bedroom, disguised as intimacy, when in reality, it's a show of power and control. For a man who does this even once to his partner, the risk of killing her goes up 750%. He's raising his hand and he's saying, I'm a killer. Next slide. Coercive control is a liberty crime because it violates our fundamental human right to live in peace and safety and freedom in our home and at work. It shows up in a lot of different ways, but underlying them all is a pattern of isolating, threatening, controlling, isolating, threatening, controlling behaviors. Pattern. A dot here, a dot there, and then over time you connect the dots and you see the constellation emerge, who this person truly is. And once your eyes are open, you can't unsee it. And it can range all the way from emotional abuse to strangulation, sleep deprivation, murder. So for today, let's focus on the broader categories that make up coercive control, like financial abuse. Financial abuse is rampant in this demographic, putting her on an allowance, hiding assets, taking out loans in her name, ruining her credit. Complete control over a victim very often includes control over her finances, like pressuring her to make early withdrawals from her retirement account. Take Bob Bashara, for example, president of the Rotary Club. My dad belonged to the Rotary Club, wonderful organization, but any organization can be camouflage for a covert abuser. Take Bob, for example. He was convicted of paying his handyman to murder his wife, Jane. Jane's sister said that Jane loved Bob more than anything, and she would have done anything for him except turn over her life savings, her retirement savings to him. And Jane's sister believed it was this refusal to do that motivated Bob to kill her. Here's a quote from his defense. "How could I have killed my wife if I was president of the Rotary Club?" Remember from earlier, a common tactic of our perpetrators is hiding behind that polished public image. That's what he called himself, president of a service club. But one of our jurors had a few other choice names for him. Monster, narcissist, sociopath, master manipulator, arrogant, pathological liar. Doesn't it look like something straight out of the dark tetrad? Follow the money with this type of abuser, and you will often uncover the motivation. Anything in the hands of an abuser can become a weapon, even religion. It can look like not letting her or the children practice their faith, or using religious doctrine to force her into submission, or turning everyone in their shared faith community against her. Some religious leaders will even tell a woman to forgive unconditionally and submit to your husband. Legal abuse. With legal abuse, the abuse gets transferred from home into the legal arena. It can mean seeking full custody of the children, not because he cares for the children necessarily, but especially if he's been neglectful or abusive during the marriage, but as a way of punishing her by going after what means the most to her. It can mean taking her to court again and again to drain her financial resources. It can mean setting her up to get her arrested or get a restraining order against her. And please, I will remind you, please, to switch the pronouns as you see fit, as it fits your situation in your relationship. Technological abuse. According to the National Network to End Domestic Violence in the United States, 97% of domestic violence programs report that abusers use technology to stalk, harass, and control their victims. And that has happened to almost every single one of our survivors. They've had hidden cameras placed in their ceiling vents, in their smoke detectors, in the shower head. They've been locked in their home, out of their home, with electronic locks where their partner keeps changing the combination. They've been given flash drives that double as recording devices. Here's one right here. They've been stalked by a drone. One of our ladies fled from California to the other side of the country, only to find that her husband had tracked her all the way using an air tag, bottom right-hand corner there, that he'd hidden behind her license plate. Oh, another conveniently kept forgetting his AirPods in his girlfriend's car and was using the Find My Device feature to track her. Stalking is a lethality risk. And of the women who end up getting killed by their partner, again, I refer to Reed Malloy, forensic psychologist, 80% of them have been stalked prior. Hard to prove, and it's hard to get protection from, and yet it's a lethality risk. Another of our survivors was viciously beaten by her husband, who also happened to be very tech savvy. After he beat her, he hacked into her email, sent himself an email from her email address, pretending to be her and apologizing for attacking him. So what's the solution? Where do we go? Where do we go from here? Here's some signs to look for in your friends and your coworkers. Some are more obvious, like is she wearing a sweater, or is he wearing a sweater in summer, or are they wearing extra makeup, trying to cover up those bruises? There's also more subtle signs like attendance problems, being late, or deterioration in the quality or the amount of their work. Does it seem like they don't want to go home at 5 o'clock or whenever the workday ends? Are they never able to attend social functions? If she does and she's around her partner, does she act differently around him? Does he talk over her, make jokes at her expense? One of these behaviors alone might not be a cause for concern, but the constellation, remember, dot here, dot there, put it together. A pattern can emerge when you connect the dots. For managers or colleagues, here's some things you can say as a manager if there's an employee that you're concerned about. Is there anything going on at home that's making it hard for you to get to work or get to work on time? I noticed there's been a change in your performance. Is there anything going on at home that's impacting your performance? I've noticed you're getting a lot of upsetting phone calls. Is there something we can do to help with that? Or if it's a colleague, you could say, I'm concerned about you. If I can be of any help, please let me know. Or I heard you crying when you hung up the phone this morning. Do you feel like talking about it? I would like to help you get any support you need. Or I noticed a bruise in your arm. The pattern of it looks like fingerprints. I'm concerned for your safety and I'd like to help. Sometimes the survivor might feel more comfortable talking about their situation with a coworker rather than a manager, just like teenagers often feel more comfortable disclosing abuse to a friend rather than a teacher or a parent. Often talking to a peer feels safer. But at least it's a start. Breaking that silence is the first step to getting help. And it's not a problem that anybody should try to deal with alone. So here's some general guidelines to support a coworker if you're concerned about somebody. You can express concern. You can let your colleague know that you're there to listen. Listen. It's so important. When our ladies call us, our survivors, when survivors reach out to us and we spend time with them, they often break down in tears at the end, just knowing for the first time that they've been listened to, validated, and believed. They're taking a risk and reaching out and telling you and breaking that silence. You might be the first person they've confided in. That's huge. So if you can offer your help, your support, and then refer them to all the wonderful resources you have at Google, how wonderful for them not to feel alone anymore. What not to do. Don't ignore the situation. Don't pressure your coworker to talk. Don't blame them or make assumptions about their situation. Don't tell them what to do. Oh, you should get a restraining order. Don't tell them. They are the expert on their situation. Or don't place conditions on your help or support. So here's some things to say. If there's anybody in your life, professional, personal life that you're concerned about, you can say, I'm concerned for your safety, to start the conversation. Sometimes we just need the words to get us started. I'm concerned for your safety. I'm concerned for your children's safety. I'm concerned that it will only get worse. When abuse happens between one adult and another in a family, it's affecting the child. So you don't deserve to be deserved. You don't deserve to be abused. No one deserves to be abused. Sometimes they think it's all their fault, but it's not. It is not your fault. And you are not alone. Most importantly, you are not alone. I'm here to help you. I can find someone who can help. There are resources. You don't have to do this alone. What not to say. Here's some things. Please don't be careful. And these are often well-meaning comments, but they can be very hurtful, and they don't help. Don't say, why don't you just leave? It's one of the most dangerous times in an abusive relationship. Over 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after a survivor leaves a relationship. That's when most of the murders happen, after a person, a survivor, a victim raises their hand and says, I'm done with being controlled. He will often do whatever it takes to get that control back. So it's going to take careful safety planning if a survivor is thinking of leaving. Don't say there's two sides to every story. Domestic violence is a crime, not a communication issue. And like any other crime, there's only two sides here. Yeah, there's two sides, perpetrator, victim. How do you think you are contributing to his behavior? Watch out for that, especially if you're going to couples counseling. You are not contributing as a victim of the liberty crime of coercive control. That would be victim blaming. Your husband seems to be, or your partner seems to be doing their best to reconcile. They seem sincere, they seem contrite. Don't judge by appearances here. Covert abusers are all about the tip of the iceberg. They are masters at impression management. Don't say you should get a restraining order. It's just a piece of paper. It's not going to stop a bullet or a knife. Will it deter them? Will it make them more likely to attack? It depends, and that's why it's best to talk to an advocate or a trauma-informed police officer or attorney. Don't say, why don't you try mediation? Mediation implies both parties are willing to negotiate or compromise. This type of abuser does not meet anybody halfway. It's winner take all. And don't say, do you really want to break up your family? More victim blaming. And if there is abuse, the family is already broken. Self-care. Oh, please, as I wrap up here, I've laid a lot of heavy stuff on you today, and I'm sorry if some of it has been triggering. Please take good care of yourself. I think Halloween's coming up. For me, self-care, what does it look like? Going to the Renaissance Fair, putting on a costume, and forgetting all my troubles for a day. I hope you can find something in your life to provide balance with the hard work you do, the hard information you've heard here. And if you're somebody that you're concerned about, this all takes a toll on you. So please take time to eat, drink, and be merry. On behalf of all the survivors you're helping us serve, thank you so much for supporting our work.